Okay. Great, we are live. It is Tuesday, May 27th. This is the House Progressive Caucus, what we hope will be our final caucus of the year as we wrap up the legislative session. Today, we're just going to be checking in on the bills that we have left coming up this week and discussing, the approach that we want to take on those, identifying any questions we still have on outstanding bills, just have a quick discussion and wrap up. Let's go ahead and start with introductions. I'm Rep. Kate Logan from the Chittenden 16 district. That's Central Old North End in downtown Burlington. I serve on the House Committee on Environment, and I am the leader for the House Progressive Caucus.
Brian Chino, Chittenden 15 Burlington, the East District and part of the Old North End.
Would you like to introduce yourself, Mari?
I'm sorry. I'm participating in two meetings at the same time.
Welcome.
Rep. Mari Curtis from Bristol. About where I'm from right now.
What's the district? Addison.
Addison 4.
Addison.
And I'm Chloe Tomlinson, use she, her pronouns. I represent Winooski, which is Chittenden 21, and serve on the House Transportation Committee.
Great. And nice.
Courtney Record, Health First Office.
Okay, and speaking of which, I think we'll start off today by just thanking you. Thank you for your support for the House Progressive Caucus this year, Courtney. We really appreciate it. It's required a lot of flexibility and wrangling technology. Thank you. We couldn't have done it without you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So nice.
All right, so education, H454 is on your mind. Anything else that people want to talk about? There's H91. There's I've got to present a bill on agricultural water quality. Happy to tell you about it if you care, but just vote yes.
I think we should take, if we could just take a minute to cover S126 and the pharmaceutical bills, just a quick thing on that. And also just touching base on housing and what's going on with housing.
We have more action coming up on S126 and the pharmaceutical.
There's a conference committee happening right at this very moment in the next room.
Okay. So, okay. And you want to talk about H454 and we want to talk about S127?
We're just like, giving people a basic update. My violin keeps going
Yeah.
in my pocket, I'm sorry. But just like where are we at with housing, in case people are watching, or wondering what's going on with housing. Because housing, education, and healthcare were three big things this session.
Yeah.
And everything's still up in the air.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll wait before I start talking about the healthcare more, but I want to just kind of frame where I see us at and then hear people's thoughts.
Yeah.
Mari's here too, so she could always chime in.
We'll have to give her a heads up on that, I think. Yeah, so H454 that we saw the Ruth and Seth Baumgart's compromise that came out of the Senate. And I know that's going to go to conference. I actually don't know what's at play. And yeah, I don't know what kind of adjustments they're planning to make. And I just wasn't able to get updates over the weekend. So I'll try to get further updates, but yeah, I'm not sure. I'm encouraged by how far the bill on the Senate side shifted towards the House proposal last week. And so then that means the negotiating spaces between that and where the House ended up.
Yeah, well, two questions. One, am I understanding it correctly that their timeline for the House bill is not the same, and the base foundation amount is the same with a plan to do a study on the weights, so they haven't committed to the weights?
So as I understand it, the plan is to implement oh gosh, the cost.
Study or?
No, what are they called? The cost something weights. The cost centered weights rather than, so the Pammy Colby weights
Okay, yes.
are what we're adopting initially. And of course, those wouldn't be implemented until 2028 at the soonest. So I think it implements on a year faster timeline. That was the compromise. The Senate's original timeline was 2027. Ours was 2029. And I think the weights would implement in 2028. There's a study coming back on weights, though, that suggests that we might also consider shifting to the Picus, more like Picus.
What study is it? Or
There's a, so the bill says that we're going to be adopting like the Colby weights. And then there's a study that's going to come back next year about considering eventually moving over to the, what I'm just blanking on the terminology. The other type
The
of
Picus,
weights.
yeah.
Yeah, the Picus. So that's a non-binding study. The study that comes back, if we take no further action, then what's in the bill implements 2028, whether or not we adopt any other education reform.
And the governor's indicated that he would veto basically either version, so version in between would also be vetoed seriously. And I've heard mixed messages around, the governor has suggested he would attempt to bring us back into session if he were to veto, we were to pass something. I've got mixed messages about that, if that's like constitutional or possible.
Oh, yeah.
He said that he's going to bring us back until we do something that's
Well,
satisfactory.
he can't do that. We have to assent to that.
Are you sure?
Yeah,
Is
he
that
can't just recall us unless it's an emergency.
is that the
not an
understanding
emergency.
of like leadership of the house?
Yeah.
Just wondering.
I asked the clerk about this and the clerk is gonna get back to me. So, cause I said, can the governor? Okay, I'll just be honest. I said, if I refuse to come, can he send the police and drag me in like the speaker can? And if enough of us refuse to come and there's not a quorum, can he force a quorum? And the clerk said, I have to look into that. And the
Yeah.
clerk did not say yes or no. So that's why I'm hesitant to answer this because I don't know yet. What, I know the speaker
What I've been told-
can send the police to get us and drag us into
Right.
us.
Yeah.
Yes, that's allowed.
What I've been told is that we likely would not return.
We would choose not to.
quorum. We would not have a quorum. We would choose not to have it.
But then I guess the question is, can he take further action? That's what I want to find out.
I don't believe so, but I think it would be worth clarifying.
Yeah, I didn't see anything that says he could.
No,
So
It
but the
is
clerk's checking.
it would have to be an emergency.
Exactly.
You
He
have
could
to-
declare an emergency like he did for fuel dealers.
Well, he would be immediately sued.
That hasn't stopped other executives from overstepping their
Yeah,
constitutional
well,
powers.
he would also be immediately sued.
Yeah,
I would probably, like, if nobody else did it, I would. So yeah, if, like, this is where we get to, like, the final negotiations, but I think, there are enough Republicans who will vote with us that they're like, and the governor cannot force us to pass a bill. And he cannot force us to come back unless it's a state of emergency.
which if we may have a legitimate state of emergency.
Yeah,
I mean, I think we do with the housing crisis. I've been saying that for a while,
Well,
but
yeah.
I think if the healthcare stuff that I'm gonna talk about happens.
yeah,
So like, there's multiple reasons he could call us back. I
yeah,
think the question is like, if he calls us back, we could do all kinds of other stuff. We don't have to do what he says.
that's
You know,
true.
yeah, we could do, so I mean, if he calls us back, we should like pass universal health care and send him that to veto. We could, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, anyway, I like, he's the governor, we're the legislative branch, he cannot compel us to make legislation. He can't. That's gotta be unconstitutional. So he can tell us that he wants us to come back, but we don't have to. It's not, he He doesn't get to tell us what to do. That is not his job. He has a whole government that he can tell what to do within the boundaries of what we allow. But yeah, I mean, I think if he doesn't want to sign the bill or let it pass into law without his signature, and I am certain that there are enough of us that there would not be a quorum if we were asked to come back to vote on an education bill. I don't know, but yeah, we should definitely get clarification on that. Like, I've been having those conversations with not obviously the whole leadership team. But yeah, but I haven't gotten an official response on that.
Okay.
But yeah, we should pass the bill we want. I don't think there's any reason for us to do anything of what voters were asking for was property tax reform, not school reform. And there are good reasons for doing some school reform right now that in the long run will be better for the whole state. But if it's going to mean that Burlington School District gets hollowed out by funding formula that's completely unacceptable, then yeah, I'm a solid no. That's like, I don't know. And I don't think the governor's plan wasn't even popular in the first place. Like, I have a really hard time understanding how he's gonna come out on this okay if he forces the issue.
I know many people who are usually apolitical or not that politically involved who are activated now because in some rural districts, they're calling their state reps who are Republicans and expressing their concerns. And some of the Republican state reps are actually saying, too bad, suck it up, your kid will be fine. And so now people who were apolitical are now talking about running as independents against them. So I think this could backfire if they keep it up, because a lot of people, when I was on the school board, we were facing a financial crisis where our budget didn't pass and our superintendent left. So we were like trying to cut the budget and pass a new budget while finding an interim superintendent and launching a search. It was like chaos. And during that process, one of the board members who's an economist cautioned us that, because they do macroeconomics, that in an economic system, if you change too many variables at once, it makes the outcome even less predictable, and it can completely disrupt the whole system. And that's exactly what he's doing. You can't change all these things at once.
Yep.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if it was Emily Kornheiser was talking about adjusting the financial policy and the policy and the spending stuff kind of in pieces, and over time it's got to be incremental. And what's interesting to me is anytime we propose a bold change thing, that just destabilizes everything. So I don't know. I just don't think this is heading in a good place, and it's affecting kids. They're actually, like, kids are aware that there's kids panicking that they're going to have to change high school in the middle. It's like affecting the mental health of our children.
Yeah.
So I honestly don't know who he's doing this for, other than maybe wealthy people.
Yeah, I mean, it would cut taxes, it would lower property taxes.
There's other ways we can do it.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, I know you know that, but I'm just saying, like, this is not people want tax.
Yeah, no, but I think,
Like
it is, the depth of voter engagement often with a policy issue is like 2 bullet points. So this will cut taxes.
Yeah.
Like, rural schools are too expensive. That's probably that's his whole messaging. This is better, this will be better. And then there's a little icing on the cake with that equity language that they've been using. Like, this will give more equitable opportunities to all Vermont students. It will equalize education. It's a really strange, everybody will have the same opportunity. It'll just be a worse opportunity. We'll just lower the bar. But yeah, so I don't know. It's hard to know how it'll play out politically. It's pretty much all that right now. He just wants everything to cost less, and he wants to shift us to vouchers. So over the long term. Because like, as you disinvest in the public school system and people get dissatisfied with the education their kids are experiencing, then they're gonna want choice. Yeah, anyway. Yay. Let's get I'll let Jill and Lori know that folks really want a clear understanding of what happens if the governor vetoes the education bill
Okay.
and what our options are.
It would be good to get the speaker's opinion, and
Yeah.
clerks impartial and nonpartisan, so I always trust when the clerk says, like, here's the because sometimes people don't tell us everything
I
because
know.
they have a plan, so it'd be good to
Right.
hear their
Yeah,
perspective, and then
Yeah.
I'll keep you informed as soon as I hear back,
yeah,
because I think that I think that she's also looking at history.
yeah,
Because I'm curious, like, it's like Vermont has had an interesting, if you look at our history, there's been these moments where traumatic things have happened,
Yeah.
you know, and so I'm curious, like, if it's
Yeah,
ever happened.
I appreciate that. I think it'd be really good to know objectively because I think it's troubling that I think
he keeps
Phil
saying it.
Baruth, well, also Phil Baruth, I think went on record in Digger, or he said it in the Senate and it was reported in Digger that he was acknowledging that the governor will call us back. So it's also ceding power.
Yeah.
Without
Yeah.
a clear understanding of what the actual
Yeah,
Yeah,
law is.
exactly.
yeah.
Tonight,
Well, he can call us back, but that doesn't mean we have to come back.
okay, well, I guess it's a little bit, maybe too nuanced for, to be saying publicly and
Yeah,
being reported on in Digger because it implies that the call is binding. Like, that's the way I read it.
And it's giving something up too prematurely. If we have a power to resist that, we should be clear we have that.
Yeah, we shouldn't be suggesting.
Yeah, that we're just gonna give in, and yeah.
well, and I know our constituents are behind us, so like.
Yeah, that's,
Okay, so healthcare,
That makes sense next, because they're both really connected, because if
Yeah.
S-126 works out.
Yeah.
So I just want to preface it by saying it was written without really taking account for what might be happening in the next month or two, and that did come up on the floor when people, like, our committees talked about it. But like, there's nothing in that bill preparing for the collapse, like the true collapse of the financing of the healthcare system from federal policy changes. So like, let's just assume all that fell apart and things continued the status quo. S-126 had the potential to save massive amounts of money. And 80% of our education expenses, I think in general, I might mention the exact number, but approximately 80% is personnel. And if the personnel's health insurance went up 16% last year, it's interesting that the average property tax rate went up around about that much. I don't think they're directly correlated, but it's interesting. We're looking at 15 to 25% increases. A lot of them have Blue Cross Blue Shield. That's the 25% one. So if S-126 and these other bills regarding the pharmaceutical spending and the hospital spending, if they succeeded, then we would save massive amounts of money that would stabilize. So like, imagine if all those public employees' healthcare went up 5% instead of 25%. It's still going up. But if it goes up 25%, then there's going to be, it carries forward. So then you see, no matter what we do, a spike in taxes because we have an obligation. So like, the governor really should be focusing on like like bringing the hospitals to heel and like stopping people from like price gouging on
I mean,
drugs.
there's a lot of things the governor should be
Yeah,
doing.
but so that's really like, we focused on the healthcare cost and some other elements of property tax reform. We could probably save a lot of trouble here, but the issue now is that I didn't read the recent version, but the budget reconciliation in Congress does significantly cut Medicaid. I'm hoping we'll get a briefing on what that looks like for Vermont, but 27% of the state budget is Medicaid. 30% of Vermonters get either primary or secondary Medicaid. Most of them are primary.
It's 180,000 Vermonters.
Yeah, and so that alone is destabilizes the healthcare system. But then there's a second piece, which is the federal tax subsidies that will expire in 2026 that they are indicating that they don't want to renew. Yes, because they want to repeal Obamacare, so and Vermont has all these protections we put in place in my first few years here when Trump first came in. So, but then it won't matter if these tax subsidies get taken, because like my health insurance used to be 700 and something a month, and I finally filed correctly, because I would get a refund back because of the tax credit. So when I filed correctly, now I pay 8 cents a month. Now I can't afford to use the healthcare, but if something happens to me, at least it's capped at like 20 grand, so it's not like I go bankrupt. But the point is, like, if these tax subsidies fail as insurance rates rise, it would go from 8 cents to $800 a month for me, which I would drop. And so would many others. And then as we drop our insurance, then the next year, that smaller pool, the people who will keep it will be the ones who really, really need it. Like the ones who are like, I have to pay 100 a month, otherwise I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
Or pay 5,000 a month.
Yeah.
So, but it will go up. So it will create this cascade of out of control price. And I think we will see insurance companies go insolvent, providers close. Because like as a healthcare provider, most of my clients are Medicaid, and I've offered them sliding scale if they lose their Medicaid. But the reality is I cannot keep my practice open for if everyone only pays me $20 because of the overhead. So I would probably stop taking people and just find a new job and see these other people as a part-time thing so that I don't abandon them. But imagine if like doctors' offices are closing, it's already happened. So it's not looking good at this point.
No,
So we're doing everything we can here. I'm hoping we can take some testimony on the latest thing. I was hoping the conference committee on S126 would consider something about Medicaid, but we keep being told like, well, there's other committees that will be looking at that, like the emergency board and the joint.
yeah,
So then that's what leadership's plan is. So I'm trusting that they will be monitoring the situation, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get called back at some point because of healthcare in 6 months.
Yeah.
Because there's only so much we can do right now.
Yeah.
So that's my healthcare update. It's not looking good for this country.
yeah, no, I think we probably ought to be planning a trip to Washington, DC after the session's over, while the Senate is taking up the stupid resolution. That is, I mean, like, I don't know how deeply you've gotten into what's all in that bill yet, but it goes way beyond Medicaid. Goes way
The
beyond.
reconciliation. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's
They're
like-
cutting a lot, right? A lot of programs across
And
government.
policy, there's a lot of policy in there because it's not just a budget bill, it's a reconciliation
Yeah.
bill, so that means that they can put a ton of stuff in there, so anyway, it's
Well,
not good.
their plan, you know, them, you know, like
Republicans.
Trump, yeah, Trump and the Trump aligned Republicans. It's not all of them. Like,
They're all voting with them, so.
well, I think I just want to designate that a lot of Vermont Republicans are appalled by this.
Yeah.
You know, so that because I feel
Well, they
comfort in that.
they can say that.
So that their plan was to. They're doing everything they said they would do. They were going to use impoundment to hold back money while they pass rescissions. That's what these are,
Yeah.
rescissions and policy changes.
Yep.
And basically rolling us back to before the New Deal as they set the conditions in place for a 21st century Great Depression that we're not prepared for. Right. And I don't want to like make people worry too much, but Dr. Levine did warn us that the avian flu is a very real risk.
Yeah.
And so could you imagine if in the next 2 years, you know, we're in a Great Depression? And then the Guard warned us about World War III in 2026. It's unclassified. They said China's planning to invade Taiwan and they're preparing for it. So like there's this this convergence of very bad things coming in 2026. And I don't think people realize how bad it's gonna get. But no, I don't want to be too negative. I think the positive thing I would say is that the way I think we're gonna get through this is becoming hyper local. That people should be building relationships with their neighbors right now and thinking about like local mutual aid networks and where you can grow food locally.
Yeah.
Because the banks aren't going to be able to kick everyone out of our homes if we can't pay our mortgages.
No.
They won't have the capacity, but so people, I don't think people are going to lose. And landlords, I don't think landlords are going to be able to evict people if everything's like that bad, but people are going to be starving.
I'm not ceding, no, we're not gonna get to that point. Like, I'm sorry, that means Americans are just gonna lay down and take it.
Well, I think there's going to be an uprising, but it's going to take that for people to wake up.
Well, yeah, no,
unfortunately.
like, I would hope that people wouldn't just, subject themselves to feudalism, in our lifetimes. So I refuse, like, that's not the future that I accept at this point. If we get there, then I think we'll be able to figure it out on the local level. We're pretty resourceful.
Are there
But-
specifics we should watch for on S-126 with the
Yeah.
pharmaceutical bill? Like, do you have a sense what direction the Caucus committee is gonna go, or do you have
Yeah.
concerns about what might come out of that report?
I have faith that there's gonna be some minor things that they do, because we didn't. I think the biggest, and Mari might want to weigh in as our guest here today, but like, and my fellow healthcare committee member, but my understanding is the biggest issue of contention in S-126 was that the Senate wanted global hospital budgets, and we weakened that part because what we were hearing is that reference-based pricing and global hospital budgets at the same time was a lot, and that if we implement reference-based pricing, it's going to save money. But I think the Senate was actually bolder, wanting to do kind of what I was saying earlier, a lot at once. And I think what we did is paced it differently. And so that's, yeah,
There was something else that sorry, I have
it's okay.
mediation agreement today.
I can't remember the other thing either. That was the big one I remember.
Yeah, and I think the Green Mountain Care Board was in agreement with our position that we not do so much at once.
But I don't think it's going to be a big, I think they're going to figure out a compromise. I have faith
They're
that it's
probably
figured out.
going into conference already.
They're in there right now.
Yeah, they might be done.
I have a feeling it's going to be quick.
Yeah.
And the plan all along was the Senate sent us the skeleton of a bill quickly, knowing, Ginny Lyons even came in and testified, like, this is an outline. We're trusting you're gonna like fill it in. And we took a lot of testimony and we filled it in. We got it as good as we could pushed as long as we could and send it back knowing that there would need to be a conference committee to kind of polish it, and that's what they're doing now. So I have a feeling it's gonna be the best possible thing with a lot of agreement.
Yeah.
But at a time of uncertainty where a lot of it may not make sense in a few months because of the drastic changes, and there's nothing we can feel like inaction is not an option. So we're taking action it's like the best possible thing we can do with what we know. And it may need to, we may need to pass some additional legislation in an emergency session around healthcare, depending on how it plays out.
Yeah.
Okay. And pharmaceutical bills, I'm trying to think, is there any in place still, or do they all pass the 340B? That passed, right? Where's that?
We just sent it back to the Senate.
Yeah, we're waiting for them to respond.
And then the Green Mountain Care Board hospital monitor bill, I believe that was last week. Did that get received?
82, I'm not sure where that is.
But these are important bills that have the potential to save Vermonters a lot of money and to save the system of care a lot of money. And
And the 266.
that's the
That's 340B.
yes. So because the two areas that have stood out this year where of high expense and lack of accountability were around for many years, around pharmaceuticals and the hospitals. I think the most egregious thing was learning that UVM Medical Center is raising prices 6,000% on certain cancer drugs
Yeah.
to fund other programs. And yeah, that was really like, and that they have over $2 billion in assets and like 1 billion cash on hand. So they, I think they could find some money in their system to adjust as we figure this out. Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. I don't want to take too much more time on healthcare. This was going to be quick, but it is probably one of the most significant years in my experience here around healthcare policy, because the action we're taking now really in the long term could stabilize the healthcare system and also improve delivery across the state.
Right.
And if it plays out the right way and we're reinvesting from these institutions and sort of expensive institutions into local primary care, and the idea of hub and spoke, like we have this hub and spoke model for opioid treatment. And so we're looking at regional centers of excellence where you'd have hospitals and networks of primary care connected with them. We could really have a system of care in Vermont that's sustainable and accessible to everyone, but
It does rely on Medicaid funding.
it relies heavily
Yeah.
Medicaid funding and tax subsidies.
Yeah, so we,
Yeah.
it's like, there's just not, there's nothing we could do before Friday
No,
on that. Yeah, so we might have to come back.
yeah, and I have plenty of ideas that I'm not gonna get into today because of time about how the healthcare system can adapt to this.
Yeah, but
That
we're
I
not
would-
there yet.
Yeah, we're not there yet, but I'm prepared. So like
Yeah.
when the time comes, if our committee's talking about that, because
Yeah.
people don't want to hear it. So I don't
Not
get
yet.
into it. But I'm creating a list. I have ideas of how we could patch together some kind of healthcare system, but we're not going to be able to address the really expensive drugs if they're not available.
Right.
Supply chains collapse. But I'm just thinking more like the basic care you can get in a community. How do we sustain that? So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, no, a lot of uncertainty. We're going into a lot of uncertainty after the session.
Do we want to check in with the housing clerk?
Sure, there's there's the housing bill.
To housing, it was like,
Well, there's S 127, and then the Senate passed H 454 as a placeholder bill in case like S 427 or whatever. That
91. Wait,
Sure, 491. That's coming back on Friday. I thought it was 4.
oh.
That you have it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Oh, I'm sorry. Not
You have
that,
it.
whatever
the house housing omnibus bill.
Yeah, 459.
461, I don't,
Yeah,
yeah,
whatever.
yeah, we know, okay.
Whatever that bill is, the House housing bill.
Yeah.
Basically what the Senate did last week,
479.
479, thank you. What the Senate did last week was they put their original chip proposal on that bill and sent it back to us.
Yeah.
So it's got some stuff that from the House side that ended up in the Senate bill, and then it has some stuff from the Senate bill that ended up in that bill as a placeholder in case negotiations on S 127 break down and that we're not able to come to a nice conclusion on committee of conference. So that 479 is what will pass as a compromise if we can't get where we want to get on S 127. But I mean, S 127 is basically just like market-based housing policy, you know, like market incentives. That's basically all it is. Just very like low investment, low out of pocket, taxpayer investment. There's some funding in there for, you know, VHIP and other primarily market centered housing reforms, like helping landlords do various things, but no substantial new investment in building new housing. And then except for authorizing this new project-based TIF. So that's the housing bill. Any stuff y'all wanna make sure we talk about on that? I thought the changes that we made last week to S 127 were as far as I would go. If they took out any of the affordability provisions that were in S 127 that we voted out last week, I would be a no on the conference report. So for example, that's like, if you're getting the affordable housing incentive, which means that you can retain 80% of the increased property tax value, because you've committed to having at least 20% mixed income, to having a mixed income development, which is at least 20% for low and moderate income households, then the property needs to be basically like, those units need to be affordable in perpetuity. So that's an important piece. That whole incentive structure. It's not inclusionary zoning, but it does capture, it does incentivize affordable housing development, and it'll work really well for affordable housing developers. They'll be able to take advantage of that structure very easily. Trying to think what else are the other affordability components. Anyway, that's the big one. That was very controversial. In fact, that might end up getting the bill vetoed. Because essentially what developers are asking for, what the governor is asking for is no, like, basically no affordability requirements whatsoever.
So if that gets vetoed, like if we come back for a veto session, is there room to like, I guess what happens, like we need to pass that.
So
Well,
Like, it
and
has
that
so many
bill,
different things.
that bill that's on the calendar for Friday.
Oh, then we can use that.
Yeah.
you can also introduce a
In
new
a
bill
few
in a
weeks.
special.
We
You
can
can introduce a new
also-
bill.
Yeah, we could also introduce a new bill in the veto session. So they could, he could veto it. There could be a bunch of negotiations between now and the veto session. I mean, I do think that we should plan on coming back for the veto session.
The 16th and 17th, right?
Yeah.
June.
Yeah. But yeah, there could be a bunch of negotiating that happens. Any negotiations that happen between now and the veto session, like when we come back, I'm gonna be a no.
Why are they doing it on a Monday?
I don't know.
It's just dumb because that's like a day that we don't normally come, and
Right.
it's so disruptive to my clients to have
I'll mention that to the speaker.
Yeah, it's just not fair to us because
Yeah, I'll mention that to the
like why would you not do? Yeah,
we already have our routine set around not being here on a Monday.
yeah. It's just I
Yeah.
don't get it.
And I
Kinda like
I
phone tap.
continue those patterns
Yeah.
like through the whole
Yeah,
year.
most
not being
people
here on
use
the-
Mondays for something else
Yeah.
year round.
I have 5 standing meetings on
Yeah.
Mondays. Like I will not be here on Monday.
I've been through many veto sessions and special sessions before, and I've seen every possible thing happen. I've seen this like
Yeah.
override vetoes because like he vetoes something and the speaker or whoever is able to like lift the votes.
Of enough Republicans.
Yeah, they've done that before
Yeah.
because he's vetoed things that he didn't complain about, and then he vetoes it and like with the like pensions bill. It
Yeah,
was
that
the
was
first time in
primary one.
history
Yeah.
that every single, it was a unanimous override. Like no Republican voted in support of him. And it's the first time that happened to a governor. And it's because doesn't always, he's not really a good partner. So,
It doesn't communicate well with his caucus.
yeah, I think it's intentional though. It's not like he makes like sometimes I make a mistake. Like I forget to tell somebody something because I'm busy. He just does what he wants and then
Right.
expects people to just like,
Yeah.
comply. He's a bit of a tyrant. So he's like a tyrant with a smile and a race car. But
Very remote.
yeah, I digress. Yes, that passive aggressive thing people do. That it just back to like what would we do around housing? If none of those bills will fly, I would think that the next thing would be to start over and the leadership would somehow be like, all right, we're gonna start over with these things that everyone agrees on. And then that might be all that happens. Like this might not be much,
Right.
but we have to move forward with investing in housing or else. I don't know. I can't see us not doing that. I just feel like he keeps trying to hold us hostage over all these other things just to like deregulate and like
Yeah.
And I don't see us, I can only see us going so far.
Yeah.
So I think he's gonna just bully us until, he's gonna bully us and see how far we'll go, and then he'll cave like eventually, because we need housing, keep moving forward.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's what seems to be the pattern.
Well, yeah,
He'll cave eventually.
Patty voted no on the housing bill and stood up and said that the only reason she was voting no is because there's a private right of action.
Wait, no, in the
No,
housing?
that was the
That's the
housing
data-
bill. That was the
that's the-
data privacy bill. Why did she say she was voting no on the housing bill? I can't remember. Anyway. Yeah, no, I mean, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Like, this is the first year that we've had this kind of dynamic really in the legislature that I can remember. Because the first 2 years of Phil Scott's governorship, there wasn't a supermajority. And it wasn't this fractious. It was his first 2 years.
Yeah, it was hard, but not this hard.
Yeah, and then
It wasn't as bold.
going into like 2018 elections, that was when the supermajority was originally secured. And so we've had one up until now, and now like everybody's fighting. So this is an unprecedented year.
I feel like every year I've been here is unprecedented. It just keeps getting
Yeah.
more and more unprecedented.
Yeah.
Like it's like falling apart.
Is there a precedent? I don't think there is a precedent anymore. I think we just have different circumstances every time. But like the political dynamics this year in particular are very fraught.
Yeah, one thing I would, if I had to predict if the governor vetoes it, if I had to predict what happened, I would think that there was like a lot of, that rural caucus amendment united, it had Republicans and independents united with Democrats, right? Like the rural caucus. Yeah.
14.
Yeah, but in an override, if there's a way to get those Republicans to vote against him by including pieces of the rural, I could see that like Democratic leadership conceding some of that,
No.
stuff, or you don't think so?
Nope.
See, I think you know better because you're on the committee, but I could see them.
No, I'm not on the committee.
You're not on but I'm talking about like the zoning and stuff, isn't that your?
There's no zoning in there.
In 127?
Yeah.
Wasn't that the 51 thing?
There was some appeals stuff.
What was the 51 thing? Or the
51%?
more thing?
That is not, that's just policy. That's like in order to get the funding, you have to, that's like VIPC stuff. They, in order to approve a project for that program,
Is that shit?
they would need to be able to show that it's gonna be a net of 51 or 60% square footage is dedicated to housing.
And so you don't think that if the choice was
No.
between giving the governor complete deregulation or like getting a few votes to flip
No.
it, that they wouldn't cave on that?
But for 51%,
Wow.
like I've had extensive conversations with folks about that. That would be that would be really, really bad for the whole state. It might be really good for like 5 towns.
Could they
5
figure
very
out a
small
way to
towns.
carve it out for them?
Well, that would be the only option.
Okay.
And that's what, like, when I ended up having conversations with rural caucus leaders, I was just like, figure out a way to make this more tailored.
Yeah.
Like, we're in towns with zoning of like this, then you can do the 51% thing. But like, imagine only 51% in Winooski. Like, you'd be building fucking shopping malls, pardon my language, but like, it would be
Yeah,
shopping malls.
I get that. But so it sounds like there's a possibility that if we needed to gain some votes in an override, there could be some compromise around that stuff that was targeted.
Yeah.
I think
but
that would be the
for-
way I would see it going.
But 4 is a red line. Like, you need to prove that you would not have been able to finance the project
Even though it's
without the
like,
money.
what I was hearing is like, that's really hard to, like, it's hard to, in some of these cases, it's hard to like truly measure that.
No, it's not. You have a project budget. Your budget is negative $30,000.
Yeah, I mean, there are some arguments that, those numbers aren't hard, like they're always estimates.
Yeah, that's right.
It incentivizes people to, ramp up their estimates really high. But at
Right.
the same time, another thing that I heard, Brian, that was really convincing to me was that pretty much all other similar programs, as well as Big Tip, have a but-for clause. It's not like this is a
Yeah.
uniquely,
Yeah.
hefty administrative burden. It's like typical with this kind of program. So without some kind of clear rationale why in this particular context, it's not a great, I don't see why.
Yeah. It's like saying that it's like doing math is way too hard for small towns.
Maybe the answer would be to, and then we can let it go because we're not gonna fix it here, though it's fun to like have space to talk about it because I
Yeah.
feel like we're silenced a lot. That maybe the compromise would be, we're not gonna change but for because that's standard. But the state finds some way to provide extra support for communities who don't have the staffing. Like similar to what LAOB is doing with providing navigators, like we're starting to roll out
Well,
support for people
I
to
think-
navigate things.
I think they're gonna have to come up with specific project examples, like when a large number of people have asked for examples of projects that would not be able to go forward if it weren't for those policy changes, and they haven't been able to give an example. The location piece, they were able to provide an example. So
Yes.
it's like there's a 200 unit housing project in Fairleigh that will need, they'll need to install municipal sewer and water in order to be able to do it, and they need the funding because that's currently a tier 2 area. Once they install that municipal sewer and water, though, it will become a tier 1B area, so they're going to be able to use the chip investment in municipal, or the chip funding for municipal infrastructure that will actually make it upgrade the town to a different status. But right now it's tier 2. So that's a good example, like why we should be more relaxed on location, because it gives towns an opportunity to put in the infrastructure that would allow them to get like a tier 1B or even a tier 1A status that currently don't have it. But then like for the other stuff, except for the example of that, like the town with zoning where they don't go above 2 stories and there's storefront required on the first floor, that's like a handful of towns. So you can carve those, but they weren't willing to carve it out. And so then you just have to look at who's advocating for it the most strongly. It's developers, because they'll get higher margins.
The same
Other
developers
projects.
who funded the Republican campaign.
Yeah,
Election, like,
exactly.
Yeah,
So that's
misinformation.
where I'm
Yeah.
like, give me an example of a project in a small town that is not gonna be able to move forward without us making this policy change. We can carve it out for the small town, but yeah, I've been very skeptical, especially given what we heard early on in the session about Governor Scott's sort
Oh,
of
yeah.
motives
Yeah.
for this session and his future development
Yeah.
plans. Anyhow,
Well, we went longer than we said we would.
is there any more information we need on housing policy for this week?
I don't think so.
Yeah. We could get clarity though on what process might look like if he vetoes that bill.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Okay,
I'll keep people posted on what I learn about our powers and duties in the case of a recall, an unwanted attention of a recall,
yeah,
or whatever you call.
and I'll try to get what Jill's
Okay,
saying about that as well,
okay.
what the speaker has to say, because I would imagine we'll get a very objective
We'll definitely get an
Clerk.
objective professional opinion from the
right,
clerk.
and then we might get a little bit more of a politically nuanced response from the speaker.
Should we ask Tanya to talk with leadership in the Senate and then we can compare what each of them say?
Yeah,
Well, I mean, leadership of the Senate, it's
rolling,
I still wonder
Rolling
if
over.
it's Tanya.
yeah,
You know what, it would be, I don't like talking to them, so maybe someone else could do it, but maybe someone could, after we learn this, talk to the governor's folks, just say, so when he says this, what does he mean? And like, get them to explain his process and rationale. I'm kind of like not talking to them, although I have to work with them. I'm going to Denver for this summit and I have to work with the administration all week on an emergency plan for the opioid pandemic or whatever.
yeah.
So I'm gonna have to talk to them, but I mean, as legislative liaison, if someone else wanted to at some point ask him, I guess we should wait, but like, be curious to see their, like, so what does he plan to do when he says he's gonna bring us back? Like, how is he gonna do? I guess I could ask him, I could ask Jason that if I see him in the hall. Because it'd be kind of fun to just like watch the reaction.
Yeah.
You know, and hear the response and then we can compare them.
Yeah. Sounds good. Yeah, let's get all the information we can. Okay, are we all set? Great, okay. Well, that's a wrap for 2025. Thank you.
Until the special session.
Right, till the game.